This analyzes whether Carol truly surrendered to the hive mind in episodes 7 and 8, or if her apparent emotional collapse is actually a calculated evolution of her resistance. By examining her reunion with Zosia, the awkward intimacy of shared memory, the Spitz card game, the stadium sleepover, and most importantly, the whiteboard notes Carol never stops writing.
What are the people like on Kepler 22b?
This breakdown argues that Carol hasn't abandoned her mission. Instead, she's changed tactics, embedding herself emotionally inside the hive mind while slowly paying a personal cost she may not be able to recover from. If Carol had really surrendered to the hive mind, the whiteboard wouldn't exist. And that's the first thing you need to understand before any other scene in episodes 7 and 8 even matters. Because while the show looks like it's telling a story about acceptance, reconciliation, and peaceful coexistence, the whiteboard tells a completely different story in plain language. They eat people. They're not my friends. Those are not the notes of someone who has joined a collective. Those are the observations of someone still standing outside it, even while sitting in its center. And that tension between what Carol does and what Carol writes is the real narrative engine of this arc. From the ending of episode 7 into the opening of episode 8, the series deliberately floods us with mixed signals, daring the audience to decide whether Carol is finally broken or whether she's doing something far more dangerous, pretending she already has. On the surface, the hive mind's victory seems effortless. Carol doesn't resist. She doesn't negotiate. She doesn't fight. All Zosia and the billions of infected people worldwide need to hear is one simple thing: that Carol wants them back. And the response is immediate, intimate, and overwhelming. Within moments, Carol and Zosia are holding each other beside a just-married car, a visual choice that is doing far more narrative work than most viewers give it credit for. Marriage is permanence. Marriage is commitment. Marriage is the end of independence. The show wants you to feel like a line has been crossed, not intellectually, but emotionally. And it works. Because if you stop watching right there, it genuinely looks like Carol has chosen belonging over resistance. But the following day is where the illusion starts to crack. Zosia comes back, not as a conqueror, not as a recruiter, but as a friend, a drink, a chat, a return to something resembling normal human connection. And this is where the story becomes deeply uncomfortable in a way that has nothing to do with horror and everything to do with identity. Because what exactly do you talk about with someone who already knows everything you've ever known? Zosia isn't just Carol's partner or former lover anymore. She's a conduit for billions of lives, memories, experiences, and thoughts. Any anecdote Carol could share, any attempt at self-definition, is already pre-owned by the hive mind. The awkward silence between them isn't bad writing. It's the point. Carol isn't bonding. She's being quietly erased. The conversation about the rescued O'Keeffe painting barely fills the gap. It's small talk stretched thin, a human reflex that collapses under the weight of total transparency. And that's when the show introduces one of its smartest, quietest tests: the card game Spitz. On the surface, it's nostalgic filler, a callback to Carol's childhood, her cousin, her Nana's rules. But underneath, it's a stress test for the hive mind's supposed omniscience. Zosia isn't great at the game. She hesitates. She loses hands. And most importantly, the hive mind doesn't know who named it Spitz. That detail matters more than it seems, because it proves something critical. The hive mind knows almost everything, but not everything. There are gaps. There are blind spots, and Carol notices them immediately. This is the moment where Carol's behavior stops looking passive and starts looking adaptive. She doesn't challenge the hive mind directly, because she already knows what happens when she does. Tough love doesn't work. Blunt honesty triggers collapse. The hive mind cannot tolerate rejection, criticism, or emotional withdrawal.
Is everything okay?
It responds to those stimuli like a failing heart. So Carol changes tactics. Instead of confronting, she comforts. Instead of resisting, she embeds. Instead of standing apart, she moves closer than ever before. Not because she's been convinced, but because proximity is now the only way to gather new information without killing anyone. The repopulation of Albuquerque is staged like a victory montage for the hive mind. Streets fill, silence breaks. Humanity appears restored, provided you're willing to redefine humanity as synchronized thought and shared consciousness. The show flirts with utopia on purpose because it wants to exhaust your resistance. Peaceful coexistence feels inevitable, even reasonable. And when Carol asks Zosia where she lives,
Wherever we hang our hat is our home.
It feels like a symbolic step forward, a willingness to see the hive mind's world from the inside. What she finds instead is a stadium, a massive communal sleeping arrangement where privacy no longer exists and individuality has been fully surrendered. Bodies together, minds together, choice erased in favor of unity. Here's where most viewers make the wrong call. Carol doesn't recoil. She doesn't leave. She agrees to stay the night. And later, she ends up cuddling Zosia. This is the moment that convinces a large part of the audience that Carol is done, that she's crossed the line she can't uncross. But that reading misses the show's most important nuance. This isn't the moment Carol's strategy ends. It's the moment it starts to cost her something real. Because while the decision to stay can still be framed as reconnaissance, the physical intimacy cannot. The cuddle isn't tactical. It's emotional leakage. It's the first visible crack in Carol's armor. And the show knows it. That's why it doesn't frame the moment as erotic, romantic, or triumphant. It frames it as quiet, heavy, and unresolved. Carol isn't smiling. She isn't relieved. She's present, and presence in this context is dangerous. Because the longer Carol stays close, the harder it becomes to separate empathy from allegiance. This is where the whiteboard reasserts its importance. Even as Carol grows closer to Zosia, she continues to document the hive mind as a threat. They eat people. They're not my friends. These notes aren't redundant. They're anchors. Carol is reminding herself of the truth because she can feel herself drifting. That's the real tragedy of this arc. Carol's plan still exists, but it's no longer clean. She isn't pretending without consequence. She's learning to like them, and that doesn't make her weak. It makes her human. The hive mind isn't just an abstract antagonist anymore. It has a face, a voice, a laugh, and vulnerabilities. Zosia isn't a monster. She's awkward at cards. She wants closeness. She's genuinely happy just to be around Carol. And that makes Carol's mission infinitely harder, because stopping the hive mind now means hurting people she started to care about. So is Carol still trying to beat the hive mind? Yes, but not by destroying it outright. She's trying to survive inside it long enough to change how it functions. She understands something fundamental that the hive mind does not. Affection is leverage. If she can become emotionally indispensable, she can eventually speak hard truths without triggering collapse. But the cost of that strategy is identity erosion. The closer Carol gets, the more she risks losing the version of herself who wanted to save the world in the first place. And that's why episodes 7 and 8 aren't about surrender. They're about transformation. Victory, if it comes, won't look like rebellion or triumph. It will look like betrayal, quiet, intimate, and devastating, not just to the hive mind, but to Carol herself. The real question isn't whether Carol has given up, it's whether she can afford not to.